Welcome to another Action for Happiness live event. My name is Mark Williamson. It's fantastic to have you joining us from all around the world, and I'm really excited that today our guest is Dr. Wendy Suzuki. Wendy, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, Mark. You weren't kidding when you said you were international. I saw South Dakota, Tanzania. I'm
Yes,
impressed.
it's an amazing global community. And as always, folks, lovely to have you with us. This will be a chance to learn from Wendy, but also to share ideas together. We're looking forward to seeing your responses in the chat and in the questions, but also Wendy will be sharing some interactive things that we can do together during our time together today. So let's, as always, keep it friendly in the chat and relevant and supportive, as I know you always do. And Wendy and I will be having a conversation about today's theme, overcoming anxiety. And then there'll be a chance for all of you to ask Wendy any questions on your mind. But Wendy, I thought we could start, maybe you could share a little bit about your background and story and what's brought you to this topic that you've written a fantastic Good Anxiety book all about.
Thank you so much. So, this was really a personal journey. I was first noticing in all of my students. So I'm a professor at NYU. I'm dean of the college as well. And this was well before the pandemic. I started to notice higher and higher levels of anxiety in my students. It's like, oh gosh, that is something very different that I'm seeing. But if I was really being honest, it wasn't just in the students. It was in myself, it was in my faculty colleagues, it was in my friends. And that's when I really sat back and said, okay, this is an interesting phenomenon. I really want to look at it from the perspective that I always take, that is the perspective of neuroscience and psychology. So that was really the origin of the book.
Fantastic. Well, you bring this brilliant academic perspective. I'm sure we can learn a lot from that. But I think that personal connection that we all have, I guess, to some extent with anxiety is also important here. And I'm hoping that we'll both understand a bit more all together at this event, but we'll also have a chance to leave people with some practical insights from your great work. But maybe we could start with just about anxiety in general.
Yeah.
And sort of maybe you could say a bit about what this is and maybe some of the
Sure.
misconceptions we have.
Yeah. No, that's such a great place to start. So let me start with a simple definition of anxiety. So we all know what we're talking about. My simplest definition of anxiety is that feeling of fear or worry that comes from situations of uncertainty. Whenever there's uncertainty in the mix, that's when anxiety gets activated. And of course, one can understand from that simple definition why our global levels of anxiety have gone up. I mean, have you ever gone through a global pandemic before in your life? I certainly haven't. Lots and lots of anxiety, lots and lots of uncertainty there that created anxiety. So that's a simple definition. But the other big message that I really want to start with is the idea that anxiety is a normal human emotion. Everybody has it. It's not like with some magic pill or buy the right book, you're going to get rid of your anxiety. We all have anxiety. And in fact, anxiety exists on a very, very wide spectrum. I like to think that my book, Good Anxiety, really addresses what I like to call everyday anxiety. This is the anxiety that we're all living with. If you have kids, if you have a stressful job, if you have stressful family situations, it could feel overwhelming. This is the everyday kind of anxiety that we have. I did not write it. I'm not an MD. It's not for clinical levels of anxiety, which is a different beast. This is where you must go to a medical professional to address these issues. However, I will say that all the approaches that I talk about in my book can certainly be used in clinical levels of anxiety. It's just that you shouldn't only use those approaches. But for the rest of us, I would say the vast majority of the population, these are tools, tips, and science stories that you could use to help to address everyday anxiety.
I'm really glad you made that point about the spectrum of that we might be dealing with, because as you say, I hope that what we're going to talk about today is of relevance to everyone here, but there are people dealing with really significant sort of clinical levels of anxiety, and as well as hopefully finding some benefit here, we're definitely encouraging you, if that is you, and of course, many people that I know and love who are in that situation, do reach out for help, do reach out to get professional support, as well as all these everyday helpful tips. I wondered, Wendy, before we dive into your sort of toolbox of tips and your science-based stuff that's so insightful, maybe we could get a sense of where this community's at, just, right here, right now. So folks in the chat, if you'd just like to share, maybe what should we ask Wendy? Maybe what's something that's a source of anxiety for you right now?
Sure.
Maybe we can just sort
Sure.
of tune into what's going on for people. So over
Yes.
to you, wherever you are in the world. If you just want to share a few words, again, no pressure, but if it's on your mind, I'll just read some of these out. Money, holiday stress, menopause, long
Christmas, I
health,
saw.
working
Yeah.
towns, health issues, dying, politics, school, returning to work, driving, old age, the future, the world overall, depression, family, job loss, climate change, poor sleep, and a lot of sort of repetition of versions of that. So, I mean, I'm feeling quite overwhelmed by that list, but also a real sense of connection to that. I feel like it's almost what we're feeling here is a universal sort of set of experiences, really. How do you think?
Yeah, that is such a great question to start with, because we start to realize that everybody has similar kinds of anxiety, because when we get those anxiety and feelings come up, we often kind of turn into ourselves. I'm the only one that has these approaches and I can't get help, when in fact, so many of us are going through some of the same things. And we're going to get to, at the end, I know, a real important tool to make that particular point into something that you could use every day to make your anxiety actually powerful and even a superpower.
Well, I love that word superpower. And in fact, it feels a bit incongruous at one level. Those of us that deal with anxiety find that idea that it might be helpful in some way, to be almost sort of resistant to that. But I know that the UK title of your book is actually not Good Anxiety, but Anxiety is Your Superpower.
Yes.
So why might that even be the case? Well, how could this be something that could be beneficial?
So, that was the turning point of this book. I started out, as I told you, I noticed it in my students, and I have a lot of anxiety for all those same reasons that people are still putting in the chat. I was there as well. And so I was going to write a book that was easy to write for me. How can we use the tools from neuroscience and psychology to address anxiety? And so that was going to be the case. But we didn't talk about this, Mark, so this is a new story for you. In the middle of writing this book, I went through something that I'm sure many people on the call went through, which is it was a devastating event. Both my father, who had dementia, and my younger brother, who was 2 years younger than me, both passed away within the course of 3 months. And it was just a devastating loss for my family. I'm trying to write this book on anxiety. I'm grieving. I, of course, put the book aside. I had to deal with all of these feelings. And I had a realization that changed the book into the book that the UK published as Anxiety is Your Superpower. And that realization is all of that pain that I was feeling, all of that sadness. It's not sadness. It is a reflection of love that I still have for my father and my brother. And, I love the expression, with great pain comes great wisdom. And that was the grain of wisdom that came from that terrible loss as I was writing this book about anxiety, that the flip side of these really difficult emotions are some of the most beautiful emotions that we experience. And so when I came back to writing the book, I said, what is the flip side of anxiety? What can come from anxiety? And having just tried to kind of go through this terrible grief that, of course, so many people go through, I'm certainly not the only one, I said to myself, at this moment, I need to make anxiety into a superpower. How can I do that? And that's how I approached the book. And that's how I came up with the 6 superpowers that are in the book that I know we're going to get to at the end. That's our little dessert at the end of our conversation, I know. But that's the real story. And right after I had that realization is when I was talking to the UK publishers, and they said, anxiety is your superpower. That is the title we want to use. US went with Good Anxiety, but I love the UK title.
Yeah, thank you. And before we come to some of those ways in which we can really harness our unique gift in a way that comes up when we feel anxious about something, You said something really important the other day when we spoke about this idea of we can't do anything useful until we've been able to sort of turn the volume down
Yeah,
on
yeah,
our that overwhelming feeling. So do you have, I know you have, in fact, some science-based tools that we can use to
yes,
help sort of deal better when we're feeling that sense of anxiety. Where would
right.
you start with one of those then?
Yeah, yeah. And so this is a great place to start because when they see the title Good Anxiety or Anxiety is Your Superpower, usually they scoff. People scoff and say, come on, there's nothing good about anxiety. There's nothing good about a superpower. And my answer is, you're right. When the level is so high, you're unable to do anything. So step one to get to good anxiety is to learn to turn the volume down. And that's where I turn to all of the neuroscience and psychology that I've been teaching for the last 25 years. What is, we'll go over two tools. Tool number one, breath work. Breath work is the oldest form of meditation, and I know that you must have talked about deeply the importance of meditation on this wonderful podcast. And so let me bring a physiological twist to that. Breath work is activating what I like to call our natural de-stressing part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. Did you know that every single one of you have a parasympathetic nervous system? That it's also called the rest and digest part of our nervous system because it slows our heart rate down, it slows our respiration, and it shunts blood from our muscles when we're working out towards our digestion and reproductive organs. And so you might think, oh, well, I need more of that. How can I activate my own parasympathetic system? Well, I can't shunt my blood. I can't slow my heart rate, but I can modulate the frequency and the depth of my breath. And that's what those monks thousands of years ago said. They didn't know parasympathetic nervous system, but they said they noticed that to get into a calm meditative state, this breathing, breath work, deep, profound breath is very helpful. They didn't know it, but they were literally activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that is my tip number
try
one.
and just briefly activate our
Sure.
parasympathetic systems now? Wendy, do you want to just talk us through
Yeah,
what is the
absolutely.
go-to breathing practice in that moment of anxiety? What would you
Yeah,
like
yeah. So here's my favorite one. It's called box breathing. You might have done it or heard of it. There's 4 parts. Each part has 4 counts. And I'm going to walk you through it once and then we're going to do it all together once.
Right.
Here's the walkthrough, okay? So you're going to inhale for 4 counts. You're going to hold your breath at the top for 4 counts. You're going to exhale for 4 counts, and you're going to hold it at the bottom for 4 counts. So that's where the box comes in. Okay, I invite everybody to close your eyes for just a moment. Listen to my voice. Here we go. Big inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Big exhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold at the bottom. 3, 2, 1. Keep your eyes closed as long as you want. I can tell you I do this all the time, and even leading people through with my voice calms me because I slow down my respiration in the speed that I'm talking. This is my go-to. However, you might think, I didn't like that so much. And I say to that, that's what YouTube is for. Go to YouTube. There's only thousands of different breath meditations that you can try out for free. Find one that you like. There are so many different styles and people have their own tastes. So go and find one that you like. Put it in your back pocket. Practice it with your kids. Practice it with your husband, your wife, your sister, your brother. And pull that out. I like to say that even if you're talking to somebody who's giving you lots of anxiety, you can start doing it. They don't even know you're doing it. You're already calming yourself when they're talking at you, giving you lots of anxiety.
I love that. Thank you, Wendy. I'm a big fan of the box breathing, and actually, even just in the few moments of you taking us through that, there, I felt a sort of noticeable shift in my level of, I guess general intensity in my body. It
Yes.
sort of just brought everything down a notch. So that's a nice
Yes.
example of turning down, as you said.
Yes.
I know you've got some other tips as well, so I'd love to keep going through these because I hope
Yes.
They're helpful. Where would you like to go next?
So I'm going to go to my very favorite tip. And this tip is based on many years of research that I've done in my own neuroscience research lab here at New York University. And that is the power of moving your body. Physical activity is one of the most powerful tools that we have to modulate our mood state. And let me give you the science first, and then I'm gonna tell you what it does. So here's the science. Did you know that every single time you move your body, you are releasing a whole bunch of neurochemicals in your brain? What are those neurochemicals? Well, you've heard about some of them. Serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, endorphins are all going up in your brain. You also get a sprinkling of growth factors, which are really helpful for certain parts of your brain. That is what happens every time you move your body. So here's the image that I want everybody to leave with. And that is every single time you move your body, it's like giving your brain a wonderful bubble bath of neurochemicals. This is the image. I use this every morning. I work out in the morning. I use it. I get up. I don't feel like doing it. I don't want the weights anymore. But does this neuroscientist want a bubble bath of neurochemicals in my brain? Yes, I do. So hopefully it could help you as much as it helps me. But this is my go-to. And I know what question you're asking. You're asking, how little movement do I really need to get that bubble bath, right? That I know you're asking that. And here's the answer. 10 minutes of walking. Did I say running? No, I did not. I said 10 minutes of walking has been shown to significantly decrease anxiety and depression levels in adults. And so that is so powerful. You don't even have to change into your spandex. You can do it in your work clothes. So this is my number. It's really my number one because I love talking about it. I've studied meditation in my lab, but I've studied exercise more.
I love it. Could you maybe take us through a little exercise routine then? How do we do this?
Yes, I can. I can reveal now that I'm actually a certified exercise instructor here in New York City. I often bring exercise into my NYU classrooms, my NYU welcomes and talks. And so we're going to do all of this together, but we're actually going to make it an experiment. So here's what I want everybody to do. I would like everybody to go back into that chat and type in one word that they're feeling right now. How are you feeling? Okay, so let's start to look at this. How relaxed, hopeful, tired, feared, happy. Okay, we see them all coming through. Overwhelmed,
tired, quite a lot of anxious, quite a lot
lots of tired, lots of tired. Yeah. I've done this hundreds of times since I published this book, and I usually do a word cloud. And no matter whether I'm speaking to fifth graders or CEOs, the word that is always in the center, the biggest in the word cloud, is tired. Okay, so there's anxiety in there too, but everybody is tired. Okay, so I just told you that the science shows us that moving your body can increase this bubble bath of neurochemicals, and that shifts your mood. So we're going to try and do this together, but you all have to stand up, okay, and come back. And so I'm going to lead you through a workout that's called Intensati. It pairs physical movements with positive spoken affirmations. And all you have to do is do what I do and say what I say. Okay, we're going to pretend we're in the disco. There's lots of great music going on. I love that song, Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. So we're going to pretend that's going in the background. We're going to go 4, 3, 2, 1. Punch right, left, right, left. Really use your arms here. Go right, left, right. And I say, I am strong now. You say it. I am strong now. Again, I am really strong. You say it. I am really strong. Ladies, I am Wonder Woman strong. You say it. I am Wonder Woman strong. Guys, I am Superman strong. Let's hear you. I am Superman strong. Last time. We are really strong. You say it. We are really strong. New move. Uppercuts. Right and left. Right and left. Right and left. Right and left. I say, we are inspired now. You say it. We are inspired now. Again, we are inspired right now. We are inspired right now. Last time, we are inspired now. We are inspired now. Last move, pull it down. Right and left, little slower. Really get into this. Okay, right and left. I say, we are on fire right now. You say it. We are on fire right now. Again, we are on fire now. We are on fire now. Last time, we are on fire right now. Done. Okay, give yourselves a hand. Give somebody on the other side a high 10. Okay, how you feeling? And brilliant, thank you, Allison. I think that was okay. So now we have to finish the experiment. Can you put in the chat again? Now, how are you feeling? What is that word that comes to mind? Love it, awesome, fun, happy,
Energized.
great.
Yeah.
Did it work? Yes, the experiment worked.
That was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I nearly managed to knock my bookcase over.
That's successful. That's a successful workout.
Okay, I see a lot of joy in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone who took part in that. I think that's that is science in action, isn't it, Wendy? You've kind of shown us how we're feeling. You've taken us through something fun. Thank you so much for doing that. And
absolutely,
and there's a genuine impact. So
and can I just point out how short that was? That wasn't an hour class that you go to the gym for. That was literally a minute and a half of movement. Do I think the affirmations help? Yes, I do. If you declare I am strong, if you declare I'm Wonder Woman strong, it's hard to feel less than Wonder Woman strong. So, obviously I chose that workout because it's one of my favorites, and it really brings joy in a very short period of time.
Oh, that's fantastic. So there's breath work, there's movement. I think those are two absolutely sort of fundamental skills. I sense, though, that also what you're telling us here is there's something about how we think about anxiety, almost our mindset in a way.
Yeah.
What can we do to get out of feeling overwhelmed and get more into seeing an opportunity to harness it in some way?
Yeah. This is so powerful. It is for all of us that want to use our thinking caps to think about, how am I approaching the world? So I'm talking about this idea of mindset, which is a fancy way to say, what do you believe? Do you believe that the world is a difficult place, that nothing's going to go right for me? Or do you believe that with connection and with trial and error, you can find a good path forward? Those beliefs have a huge impact on your everyday and even moment to moment level of emotion. And even the title of both the US and the UK book, Good Anxiety, is a mindset shift. Can you think of anxiety as good? Can you think of anxiety as a superpower? Now, we haven't told you those yet, but hopefully one of my goals is at the end of this podcast that everybody walks away with things that they could do, breath work, box breathing, they can do affirmations and movement in just 2 minutes and get their mood up. And they could ask, can I bring a new attitude, a new belief to even the hardest situations in my life?
Yeah, thank you. And I love what you said, Wendy, about personalizing, for example, the breathing. The box breathing might work for some, and different techniques might. I'm sure the same is true for the exercise and the mindset shifting as well. So for exercise, mine go-to is cycling. That's my kind of meditation on two wheels. But of course, there may be some in our community that have limited mobility and can't take part in some certain forms of physical activity, or perhaps couldn't even join us in that activity just then. And that's fine too. There are always hopefully ways that we can get our heart rate up and be active, whatever our situation is. Is that right?
Well, Mark, that's a great point, because people categorize exercise as particular things. So cycling, okay, that's definite exercise. What we did together, absolutely definite exercise. But walking in a museum, walking in a park, gardening, really, really part of the exercise. Do you have Costco in the UK?
No, but I know what you mean. We know what you
Okay.
mean. Yeah.
Well, I like to say, at least in all my talks in the United States, if you go to Costco, go 3 laps around the whole place. That's a great form of movement. So it doesn't have to be at the traditional gym, at the traditional track that you're doing it. It's moving your body is how to think about it.
I'm being corrected in the chat. We do have
Oh,
Costco.
okay. Well, there you go.
Showing
So
my eager
those of
curiosity.
you, I know there's more than the UK, obviously represented here, but Costco is like this huge warehouse where you can buy huge volumes of lots of things, and so it becomes a makeshift gym as you take care of your daily life.
Yeah, I mean, I remember once we did a workshop with some young mums, and they were talking about. I remember one talking about that her way of bringing activity into her routine was literally dancing as she walked with a buggy to go to on the school run, and it was like
Perfect.
reframing the school run as like this
Yes.
is my way of like boosting my mood with activity, and I thought that was a lovely example.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah.
Let's come, because I know people are going to want to get to questions, and there's already lots of
Yeah.
questions appearing in the Q&A.
Yeah.
But you want to share some of these, particular superpower tips. I mean, I know you've got this
Yeah.
sort of overarching plan that, like, once we understand anxiety and stop seeing it as negative,
Yeah.
necessarily, crappy, and how do we sort of like turn the volume down? What do we do beyond that? Where can we take it
Yeah.
next?
Okay, so the next step, so you've turned the volume down, you're practicing all your breath work and you're moving your body, and you can notice that your anxiety has come down. It hasn't decreased or eliminated, because it's a normal human emotion. So the value there is that once you get that anxiety level down a little bit, turn that volume down, now you can start to appreciate what anxiety was really kind of evolved to help us with, which is anxiety is protective for us. So 2.5 million years ago, people walking around, their dangers were, lions, tigers, and bears, physical dangers. And so this anxiety and the stress response that comes with it evolved to get us away from physical dangers. That's why the blood rushes to our muscles, and heart rate goes up. And so we can run away from the bear or fight the bear. And then we learn to decrease it. Well, our anxieties are not bears or lions anymore, but they are tweets, and they are Instagram posts, and they are whatever you look at the news or you pick up the newspaper. And so, but anxiety is still protective. And so here's how I like to think about it, that anytime anxiety is coming around, instead of thinking about it like a big heavy rock that you're wearing around your neck. I thought long time about that. That is how I picture it in my mind. Change that mindset shift. Instead, anxiety is a little kid that's saying, hey, pay attention over here. What is the kid telling you? Is the kid telling you, hey, you haven't watched that Netflix series yet? No, they're saying that project that you're working on, it needs a little bit of work. That relationship that you think is really important might need a little bit of work over there. It helps direct you to that. So what if you shift your mindset towards rethinking how these feelings of, hey, pay attention, are used by you? Just directing you, and you can say, yeah, I know. That is an important project. I'm going to focus on that. Or yeah, that is a really important relationship in my life that needs a little bit of TLC. I'm going to do that as well. So that's what it allows us to do, get the meaning out of this protective element of anxiety.
I love that. I think it's a perfect example of reframing and channeling something that can be really sort of destructive in our lives, and turning it into something that we can really harness in a helpful way. I know you talk about how to some extent there were particular types of superpowers we might therefore have,
Yes.
depending on our own relationship with anxiety, like whether it's something that we find that we're always thinking we've not done enough, or worried about what other people are thinking, or maybe can you give us some examples of those little personalized
Absolutely.
superpowers?
Absolutely. So these next three are ones, again, that I want you all to be able to go out and use today. And here's the first one. It's the easiest to kind of understand and immediately implement. And it is the superpower of productivity that comes from your own particular form of anxiety. So if you want to use your anxiety to be more productive, here's how it works. So this focuses on a very common form of anxiety, which is the what if list that comes up in our minds. For me, when I'm trying to go to sleep, I'm so tired and sleep is going to feel so good, and then bing, oh my God, what if I didn't do that fast enough or well enough, or I didn't do enough of that, and I'm immediately awake and I can't go back to sleep. That is how my what if list manifests. So here's how to, I like to call it the jujitsu move on your what if list. And what happens is you turn that specific what if list that is specific for you. You don't have the same what if list than I do, but I turn my what if list into a to-do list. Okay, I don't do it at night because I've taught myself that I will get up the next morning, write all those what ifs down, and then I will transform them into a to-do. What might I do? Ask a friend, put an action on it, do something for each one of those things and check it off. I like to actually literally with a pen check it off. Why? Because doing something, putting an action on an anxiety is evolutionarily kind of very satisfying, because anxiety evolved to help us get away, to put an action on either fighting that bear or running away. So by putting an action on our new anxieties, you can also help kind of quell that. And it makes you productive at the same time. So this is transforming your what if list into a to-do list to up your productivity.
That's great. I certainly struggle with that, being kept awake at night with the if only, oh no,
Yes.
and actually having somewhere to put that channel it is really powerful. That's great.
Yeah.
What else? Keep going. I'm loving these. What examples?
Number two is has to do with flow. And so let me define what I mean by flow. So flow is, so if you all know the cellist Yo-Yo Ma, very famous cellist. I'm a student of the cello, but I love Yo-Yo Ma, and I imagine that sometimes, not every time he plays the Bach, the famous Bach cello suites, he gets in a zone and time stands still, and every note is just pure joy. And that is a version of the psychological description of flow, that you are performing whatever you're doing at a very, very high level. And it doesn't happen all that often, but you get into this performance zone. And so I knew I wanted to talk about flow in my book, but I also knew the data that any little bit of anxiety eliminates flow. If you have worries about performance, it's very difficult to get into flow. So what am I going to say? That's too depressing to add into my book, so didn't want to say that. And I was stuck. I had writer's block. And so this is a true story. I went to a yoga class to try and get the writer's block to get through this chapter on flow. What exactly was I going to say? So I go to this yoga class, I start feeling really good. I'm doing my up dogs, I'm doing my down dogs, I flip my dog, and finally we get to the end of the class to my favorite pose, Shavasana. And so I'm laying there in corpse pose. I feel so good, and it comes to me. I am flowing in Shavasana. There's nobody doing Shavasana as well as I am doing, or maybe I should say there's nobody enjoying Shavasana as much as I am enjoying Shavasana right now. And I realized that I was in a moment of maybe not classic flow, but I called it in the book microflow. It was truly a moment of microflow for me. And so I said, okay, this is great. And I went home and I tried to think about all the other moments in my life where I had these moments of microflow. And turns out they were all over the place. I make this green smoothie for myself in the morning, and I had worked on the recipe for a long time. So every morning I enjoy kind of putting these final proportions in and drinking this green smoothie, and I feel very healthy. And that is a moment of microflow for me. Even a wonderful conversation with a wonderful podcast host, for example, could be a moment of microflow. And so you say, okay, well, that's fine. That's not anything special about anxiety. That's just appreciation, better appreciation. But no, I say this is a superpower for those of us that have everyday anxiety, which is basically all of us, because we know that the highs in our life, those moments of microflow, are even higher, microflowier, if you will, because we have difficulties. We have those uncomfortable emotions that come in. So if my life was perfect all the time, those moments of microflow wouldn't mean nearly enough. So I think I love this because it allowed me to think about different variations of flow and allowed me to really realize for the first time that those difficult conversations that I have at work, the hard things that I get through in my work or my money situation or all these things that came up, they actually make my moments of microflow even more joyful, even more happy. And that truly is a superpower if you choose to accept it.
I love that. And I think in many ways it's about experimenting until we find the moments of microflow that really work for us. So I mentioned earlier, one of my joys is cycling, and I think actually what happens when I'm on a bike is moments of microflow. And last week I didn't cycle because I had the winter bug that's going around, and it was only this week that I realized that I'd been really quite anxious and down as a result. And then when I got back out again on the bike this week, it was like, oh wow,
feels so good.
And it's sort of like disconnected me from some of that. So I think that's really wise. I really wanted to get to questions, but I know you've got another one, at least one more you wanted to share with us, and it was to do with empathy. Where do we go with empathy?
Okay, so this is my favorite superpower. So I'm sharing the very favorite superpower in the book, which is the superpower of empathy that comes from your own anxiety. Remember, we observed that so many of us have very similar forms of anxiety. So this came from examining my own oldest form of anxiety, which came from when I was a young girl. I was a very, very shy young girl, very, very shy, yet I was very interested in classwork. And I had years and years of struggle of, I want to ask questions in class. I want to be involved, but I also am terrified that I'm going to make myself look completely stupid. And so I don't want to do it. Do I want to do it? I don't want to do it. Struggle, years and years and years. Yet I was very interested in academics. One day I discover I'm at the front of the classroom. I went to graduate school. Oh my gosh, I have to be in the front of the classroom. And I realized, not that day, but years later, that one of the things I instinctually did because of my anxiety is I knew that there were 5 times as many students in that classroom that had questions versus the ones that actually raised their hands. Love all my students that raise their hands, but there's so many more. And so I would come early, I would stay late and make sure that everybody had a comfortable moment to ask me any questions. So I use my own anxiety to create empathy for my students. So
Wendy,
how does it work?
Louise in the chat has just said, wow, I can't believe Wendy was ever shy. You're so cool and so confident. So isn't that interesting?
Yes, I get that a lot, but I was. And, I never had anything to say. I didn't have a message. I had questions, but not a message. Now I have a message. So I'm not shy about giving my message, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I really love all the chat that's going on here and everything you're sharing. And I wonder if we could all just take a moment to think about what is one of our biggest, most common sources of anxiety, and how might that be something that we can use, or maybe we're already using as a form of empathy with others. I mean, I guess one of mine is I've always been a people pleaser. I really care and want to be liked, and that has both helped me in some ways, but also been disabling. But actually, I think what it means as a sort of with the empathy in mind is I'm more tuned into wanting to help other people feel appreciated.
Yes,
because that's beautiful. Kind of, it's not, I know that's something that I really value, and so maybe I'm slightly more able to do that than I might otherwise be. So that's maybe one of my personal examples.
That's beautiful. Mine that I always go to is being that new person in the meeting, like you're not sure you fit in, and so I was always that first person. I had because I was shy, that was a big deal to me. So today I use that as my superpower of my own anxiety. And when somebody new comes in, what do? How are you doing? I ask them questions. I bring them into the conversation, not the whole time, but just give them a little push, a little encouragement. And it makes me feel so good because I remember so well what that felt like in myself.
In our remaining time, I'm going to suggest we do two things. First of all, we're going to come to the questions. So if you haven't already, if you've got a question and you haven't already put it in, please use the Q&A function. And if you see someone else's question you like, please give it a thumbs up and then it will rise up the list and we'll get through some of the most popular ones. But I'd also love us, before we leave, have a chance to come back to the community and sort of check in on what we might each take away from this. So do stay with us, folks, because I'd love us to. And there's also some resources we want to mention that you can have after this session. So I'm going to come to the questions, and top of the list from Thomasina, question: how can you tell the difference between sort of normal, what you call everyday anxiety, and clinical levels of anxiety?
So that's a great question. And this comes from discussions with colleagues that are, medical doctors. Real clinical anxiety is not something you can fake over. This is again, as I think I used the term, a different beast. It is a different beast. It is truly debilitating, and so it prevents you from having a normal work life, from having normal relationships, and so it's a much higher level. The vast majority of us do have everyday anxiety, and I'm not saying that one doesn't get medication for that. That is true, but the real kind of clinical levels of anxiety are truly debilitating to one's life.
Yeah, and again, if that is something you're dealing with, do feel free to try out all of these things we've talked about today, because they can potentially help. But do, most importantly, reach out for support. Talk to people you trust. Whether that's sort of therapeutic support, talk to your doctor, talk to counselling support services. There's a huge array of both face-to-face and online support available. Let's come to Christian's question. Is there a relationship between anxiety and anger? So an example given here is that people might be losing their temper because of the situation we're in. There's a lot of hardship and suffering right now, and it's cost of living. There's worries about big issues like climate change and war, down to day-to-day issues around sort of heating and eating, as we face a kind of cost of living crisis. So it's sort of understandable that we would be angry as well as anxious. How do these things relate to each other?
Yeah, the answer to your question is yes, there is a relationship. Anger is one of the most common ways that anxiety can manifest. Even though these are two different emotions, they are very related, and anger can be part of the manifestation of a initial anxiety. So could fear, so could worry, so could closing in on oneself and isolating oneself. That could be your coping mechanism. In the book, we talk about positive and negative coping mechanisms, so that you can kind of explore which ones you're using, which ones you might want to try, and lots of tools to, again, decrease the volume of your anxiety.
Thank you. And there's a question here from Laurie, which I really love, because it's something I wanted to ask you as well. Yeah. But I think it represents lots of us have not only desire to sort of care for our own well-being. This whole community is about reaching out and caring for others. And Laurie said, what suggestions do you have for supporting someone else with anxiety, especially if they've got a sort of negative mindset or attitude, and it's difficult for them to see the good and to in a positive ways forward? It's hard enough doing it for ourselves, but helping others, where do we start?
Yeah, I think lesson number one is try not to tell them what to do. That can be taken in a negative way. And I would ask questions. How can I help? Would this sound good? How does this sound to you? And also kind of live by example. So you can't kind of force them to go in this direction, but if there are things and approaches that you are using in your life that do work, maybe you can just include your friend in that without saying, okay, now you have to do this, but include that friend in the experience itself is my best recommendation.
Yes, thank you. I love that wisdom of not telling people what to do, and most people really want to be heard first of
Yes.
all before being fixed, or if at all. And that's took me a long time to learn that. Anne has asked a question: any tips for health anxiety? Obviously, always relevant, but particularly in the pandemic and post-pandemic world, lots of it around.
Yeah. So, a lot of, I think particularly for health anxiety, is education, reading in sources, of course, that you trust, that are strongly science-based, can be helpful. I know that it's hard to find sometimes. It's hard to tell. If you're not a scientist, what can I trust? What can't I trust? I think that I'll just name one that I trust that is good generally for the general public about so many different topics. Scientific America does great work in health, science, all these things. I'm not guaranteeing that your specific question will be in there, but that is always a great place to start.
Yeah, I certainly agree that finding trusted sources. I wonder also if there's something about peer-to-peer support as well that's important here. We find a really strong sense of community within the Action for Happiness sort of broader community. There are now over 200,000 sort of active users on our app, where they're sharing all kinds of support around general well-being. But I know particularly in sort of particular health conditions where you'll find like-minded people who are dealing with the same sort of cancer diagnosis or diabetes condition or COVID risk or whatever it might be. And that sense of I'm not the only one, and there are other people, and we can share something in common, I think is really powerful, that togetherness.
Totally agree. So important.
You mentioned, this is from CK question, that this idea that we all have anxiety and that it can be beneficial. How do we make that judgment? The question is, at what point does it become a concern, and how can we sort of tap into that beneficial aspect without it sort of tipping into really impacting our daily life and activities in a negative way?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that turning it into a superpower does not mean that it still doesn't feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I'm not powerful enough to take away the uncomfortable feeling. The little kid analogy, that little kid is annoying and is uncomfortable, but it is the interpretation of that I'm asking you to change. So I think that people hope for elimination of those uncomfortable emotions, and that's the other kind of big message that I have. They're never going to go away because they are part of normal human emotional kaleidoscope. You would not be human anymore if we could do that. And the important thing is to kind of appreciate it for what it is, and it's judgment. I mean, I've evolved in how much difficulty I can endure. And as I've learned more and more tools to deal with this, like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Look at I have 5 things that I can do to address it, not to eliminate it, but in these situations that are really important to me, I'm doing tool number 1, tool number 2, tool number 3. That kind of active learning mindset for these uncomfortable emotions. We talked about anger. Of course, we talked about anxiety, sadness. All of them are kind of fair game for these kinds of mindset and other approaches.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of the principles of mindfulness. You obviously did a breathing exercise, but of course mindfulness is helping us remember that we're not really trying to push any particular feelings away so much as just notice them and let them be. And somehow when we do notice and let them be, they sort of, the volume naturally turns down a bit.
Yes.
So somehow I think maybe a mistake that lots of us make is trying to push away the anxiety or push away the difficulties rather than saying, oh, it's here, it's okay, I can see it and it's real.
Yes.
And maybe I can do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to combine 2 different questions together here. One from Claire, one from Aurora. So Claire's that she often wakes in the middle of the night with her heart racing, maybe an anxiety attack in her dreams sort of thing. So she's looking for advice about calming down in the middle of the night. And then Aurora's saying, other than breath work, which you mentioned, how would you approach quieting down anxiety before bed? So I guess in both cases, they're about our sleep, which of course is vital for our mental well-being, and the fact that sometimes anxiety can really undermine our sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. What I would recommend is something that I've practiced, which is yoga nidra, which is yoga moves specifically to um, help facilitate sleep. And it can be done right before you go to bed the first time, or if you wake up in the middle of the night. They are relaxing kind of moves. They tend to be moves that also ground you down to the ground. A lot of them I've noticed in the classes are just making you feel, yes, the floor is there. That is my kind of basis. And I think that's very, very helpful because it can be discombobulating when you wake up in the middle of the night, especially in a kind of difficult situation of, all your stress is so high that it's woken you up. I like to try that, and again, try it out, see what moves are most relaxing to you. Might put a mat or a rug right next to your bed so you could actually do that quickly if this is happening, and explore. This is all my first book, Healthy Brain Happy Life, was all about self experimentation. I tend to do a lot of experiments, not only on my subjects in my lab, but on myself as well. And it's so valuable to do that systematically and be able to say, yeah, actually, that really helped me. I have changed my life because I do that.
I agree. I do a lot of that myself, and I've been trying out this stuff for 12 years or more now. But two I found about nighttime. One is avoiding, too much screen watching before bed. But the other more important one is a gratitude practice, which I was really skeptical about, but just taking time to try and bring to mind things that I feel pleased about or grateful for, even on a really difficult day. Sort of just makes my brain and body more ready for sleep. I'm not quite sure why and how, but I find that really helps.
Totally agree. I have a gratitude journal as well. I come in and out of it, but I enjoy doing it at the end of the day.
We're running out of time. There's a couple more questions I'd love to come to, but actually what I'm feeling motivated to do now, Wendy, is to turn back to this amazing community. And while you've been talking, there's lots of appreciation for you in the chat. There's also lots of great support from people to each other in the chat, and people, a lot of gratitude for what you're sharing. I think you've left us with lots of really practical things that we can do. We've talked about these superpowers, whether it's around flow or productivity or empathy. We've also talked about practical ways just to bring the volume down, the breathing, your lovely exercise idea, and so much more. I wondered if we could maybe just ask people, what are you each going to take away personally? What's something you might do to sort of harness your anxiety and turn it into a superpower over the coming days and weeks? So if you'd like to share something in the chat, we can maybe have a look at what's coming up. So what are you going to do? So
box breathing,
gratitude, movement, just recognizing I'm not alone, reframing, read the book, finding flow, using empathy, recognizing that anxiety is normal, start walking again, exercise, yoga nidra. Lovely. How are you feeling seeing that list flying past?
Love it. If that makes me feel so good that this is going to be a change in the world from this hour conversation. Love it.
Yeah, so the next step, everyone, is to take that idea you've just had, and if you haven't had one, do try and bring to mind something you'd like to do. And as you know, we're action for happiness, not talking about happiness. So what I would encourage us all to do, myself included, is try and think about, when am I going to do this thing that I've just said?
Yes.
And find some way of reminding yourself, put it in your diary, leave a post-it note, think, I'll do that when I put my shoes on in the morning, or I'll do that before I get to bed tonight. Just find a way of building that in, because Wendy's ideas are fantastic to listen to, and Wendy, you're fantastic to listen to, but it's even better if we can make it part of our daily lives.
And can I add one more thing?
Yeah, please.
After you do that, you decide the time and you do it, please celebrate. Please celebrate that you actually did it. That is a huge moment. And so do not just say, okay, next things. It's like, give a woo or something to celebrate that moment. I'll just add
Lovely. That. What's your favorite way of celebrating a superpower that you've used, Wendy? I can imagine it's some whooping exercise thing.
Yeah, it involves whooping generally. There's not one, but it kind of depends on the mood. But yeah, it's in the whooping category.
Well, you've brought enormous energy to this conversation, which we're so grateful for. What we're going to do tomorrow is send around a link to everyone who's been part of this and everyone who's signed up, with a link to the video from this conversation, to the chat and all the things that have come up, but also to your book here in the global audience, and also the UK version, which I think has got a different title. and also your website. And I think you said there's some
Yes.
resources people can try out and access on your website. Is that right?
Absolutely. So wendysuzuki.com, easy to remember. There are so many videos. I have a TED Talk that has over 55 million views that you can do a little workout at the end. If you watch to the very end, you can get that Intensati little series, so you can do it when you need a little boost.
That's fantastic. Wendy, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to everyone in the chat. Fantastic questions, for all of your support. But maybe to let you have the last word, Wendy, is there a final thought you'd like to leave us with on this theme today?
My final thought is that I just like to say that my very favorite superpower, I remember when I thought about it, it's like, this is the one I want to talk about, is that superpower of empathy, because it comes from our own particular form of anxiety, and it brings more empathy in the world. And I love it because I can't think of anything we need more in this world right now than higher levels of empathy for each other.
Well said. The mission of Action for Happiness is all about creating a happier and kinder world together. And you've definitely given us some really practical ways that we can help make that happen for ourselves, but also for others around us as well, Wendy. So grateful. Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work. And
thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.